This is the Criterion Creeps podcast, and tonight it's Eisenstein, the sound years that's being discussed. First up is Alexander Nevsky from 1938, directed by Sergei Eisenstein. The synopsis here from Letterboxd. It is the 13th century, and Russia is overrun by foreign invaders. A Russian knyaz, or prince, Alexander Nevsky, rallies the people to form a ragtag army to drive back an invasion by the Teutonic Knights. This is a true story based on the actual battle at a lake near Novgorod. Soviet filmmaker Sergei Eisenstein's only successfully completed sound film project with producer acceptance, it was nonetheless pulled from release upon Joseph Stalin's disastrous signing of the quote-unquote peace pact with the Third Reich just a few weeks after its premiere, but it was quickly put back into distribution when the Germans also disastrously decided to invade the USSR, pact or no pact, a few months later, and it has remained an acclaimed example of Soviet film to the present time. What a great synopsis of the movie.
Yeah, it's good stuff. They really explain what Alexander Nevsky is all about.
All about the meta narrative, what was going on around the movie. So, hey, RJ, this is two movies from 1938 in a row.
Really?
Yeah, because Pygmalion was also 1938.
Do you think maybe that was on purpose?
No, probably it might have just worked out that way. Just so, did you feel watching Alexander Nevsky and Pygmalion like back to back that they feel like they were made in the same year?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Yeah.
Alexander Nevsky seems a little bit, I wouldn't say like poorer quality, but it looked older. Pygmalion doesn't look like a 1938 movie. It looked like whatever year just before color came out. That's what it feels like. Okay. Because it's really well shot and it looks good.
Yeah, it's there's like a level of sophistication that seems to be there, but I think there's like, we'll talk about it more. I think there's like there's some intentional stodginess going on here, which is like kind of playing into its epicness, where like characters talk and like move in a certain way. Because like I think in other ways this movie looks pretty stunning at times. So, this is our second Russian film in our Criterion Creep. If you recall, when we watched Andrei Rublev, these movies, like, they all are guys' names. And they were all made under Soviet rule because, like, really, I mean, that's the majority of Russian history during when you could have made a film was under Soviet reign. And the common thing between these four movies, I guess, now is they're all historical dramas, and we'll talk about why that would be. I had never seen Alexander Nevsky, and my exposure to Eisenstein in general up until like the last week or so was Battleship Potemkin. Yep. That's like the big movie everybody watches because it's the all-time banger classic, super influential thing. Eisenstein, the shorthand for him is always that he is the father of montage, which is just a fancy way of just talking about editing and just talking about like the combination of images back to back, that sort of thing. It's like first day of film school type of stuff. You talk about montage and stuff like that, and Eisenstein is the guy who comes along with it. The other guy is another Russian fellow by the name of Vertov, who made that movie Man with the Movie Camera. He was like even more like kind of like a formal guy as far as like the abstraction and stuff like that and pushing it, whereas like Eisenstein was definitely more like he wanted to still tell stories, but he also was into experimentation and trying out different things and seeing what sort of effects they would have on the audience. Alexander Nevsky and this whole box set has always kind of been on my radar as like, I should watch that one day. But then you realize, it's like a lot of time to spend watching. And fortunately, I mean, these movies aren't super long. They're not like popping in Greed or Birth of a Nation, where those movies are like quite long and they're silent and they really feel like you're watching long movies. I've actually never seen Greed, but it's kind of like my fear with it because I tried watching Intolerance, the one D.W. Griffith movie, and that thing was just like, I don't know, not for me. But I did not have that problem watching these movies for the most part. So Alexander Nevsky, I couldn't help but think watching this movie, I was like, oh, this movie feels like an RJ movie, and I don't know what that is. And I'm like, it's almost like if this movie was made in like the 90s and you're able to cast any actor in the world, who would we bring in? Who could save this movie and like really bring some box office? And I was like, there's like one man for the job. A man, I think I'll just throw out there, like Alexander Nevsky, who is a flawless example of masculinity and leadership. I think this really a Mel Gibson, I think.
Oh, you better believe I was thinking of old William Wallace and Braveheart and this bad boy the whole time. As soon as he comes out at first and you see those broad ass shoulders, I was like, that's a man. Broad shoulders and like a bowl cut. You're like, fuck, this guy's got it going on.
Oh boy, bowl cuts all around the horn.
Oh yeah. These three movies, before I even say anything, there's some pretty premium haircuts in this movie.
Yes.
Bowl cuts, beards, dippity doo, like just fucking gelled into a spike. Like it's pretty serious shit, man.
Oh yeah.
It's good hair. Good hair.
So yeah, Alexander Nevsky, it is like it's a historical drama, epic sort of story. We have the good guy prince who's called upon by the people to basically help the land and fend off foreign invaders here in the form of like the Germans, essentially, which of course is like fitting. It's 1938 in the real world. Nazi Germany is at her, invading Poland, and this movie is also about how the Poles are bad dudes, and Russia has a very complex history of Poland. And yeah, I mean, it's exactly what you expect it is. The movie actually, like the first hour is all just set up. It like and it's pretty well like what 3-4 scenes, and like within those scenes, it just like this gets built up, this happens, and then it's like, oh, now we're getting like the first big battle scene, right? Oh no, it's like one long battle scene that's like almost like a half hour long. It's kind of like, oh, that is what we're going with, huh? So I think this movie's pretty neat. I don't know. I don't love it or anything like that. It's not like, oh man, this movie blew me away. But like the visuals, the cinematography in this, and the sense of scale and composition is like fantastic. Like it looks so goddamn good. People like lose their minds over like the cinematography, like the Roger Deakins cinematography in Blade Runner 2049, and it's all very like glossy, and it's like really showing off like the primo production values and stuff like that. But this movie, it's just like, oh, we're just going to shoot stuff in fields, and it's going to be like lots of sky. We're going to use the foreground in ways that like most movies like don't even bother anymore. And yeah, like this movie you could just watch on a pure visual level and be like, wow, this movie looks great. Like the costumes are cool. Man, those Teutonic Knights are so awesome looking. They are the stormtroopers of their time. So yeah, I mean, the story is like nothing special. It's no great shakes. It's like it's exactly what you expect it's going to be. Good guys fight bad guys. The vilified, the bad Catholics, the evil, the bad church against the good, upstanding Russian folk who don't need none of that religion in their atheistic Soviet life. And we're just going to bash around and smash people up. It's going to be a fun romp. There's going to be even some lighthearted like moments in the battle, and then there's going to be a bunch of dead bodies and people drowning and freezing to death. And we're going to call it a day. That's kind of my general feelings on the movie. RJ, what did you think of this 1938 Braveheart?
Well, I feel like people would think that I would not like these movies as they're really old and they're black and white and they're from Russia and they might seem boring. But as you mentioned, this Alexander Nevsky, he's got some pretty strong Braveheart vibes. I was genuinely surprised. I thought this movie was really good.
Sweet.
I agree with you. It didn't blow my world. I wasn't like, oh my god, that's the best movie I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's not like I can't believe it took me this long to watch it.
Yeah, nothing like that. But yeah, I started it, and even the first 5-10 minutes, I was like, But once it started going, man, I was like, man, this movie fucking rules. I thought it was really cool. Like you were saying, there's some like pretty amazing shots of like cinematography, the kind of setup and or the sets and all the costumes and stuff are so cool. Like the knight's helmets, and like the one guy just has like a eagle claw on his helmet, which
Yep.
I think is really funny. There's like a lot of crinkly old men in like cloaks, like kind of just like lurking around, and that's really spooky. And I thought that was wicked. Um, this movie's pretty dark. There's some dudes throwing babies into like pits,
Yeah.
and like I'm sure there was like a bed underneath, but those dudes are really like just dropping babies like from their hands, and like you know what I mean. I'm pretty sure someone caught them, but still,
I like when they throw the kids in the fire. That's
yeah, they're like throwing kids into fire, and you're just like, holy shit, right? That's pretty crazy. All of the battle prep stuff is super wicked. Like when it's all the soldiers like mounting up and they're singing that Russian song, and like they're all being handed swords and chainmail, and it goes on for a long time.
Yeah.
That scene is fucking awesome. I really like that. There's a really cool fan organ being played in the background. So like all the Russian like peasant guys are getting their swords, and then there's all the cloaked like crinkly old men walking around playing organs. I thought that was fucking wicked. I thought it was so cool. This movie also has some really nice design and like the way they show progression of time and stuff. There's one shot that's really cool where it's like canoes in the snow, and everyone passes it, and then they fight for a while, and then they pass it again, and it's like kind of snowed over, and there's a couple bodies in the snow, and they're kind of snowed over on too. And I was like, that's really cool. I like that because like it's nothing like new. It's nothing I've never seen before, but I was like, that's cool. It's a neat thing to do in this old movie. I think like I was saying, all the build-up stuff is really, really good. And the music is really good too. The only thing I didn't like is there's a weird part where, like, they do all these things really well, and then there's one scene where they're actually like fighting each other, and the music seemed like
okay.
like really cheesy.
Here comes the cavalry music. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like boom, boom, boom,
It's,
boom,
and
boom,
there's
boom,
honks
boom,
in it.
boom. Yeah, and it was
Yeah,
like it was like so upbeat, and it seemed really out of place.
It felt really different from the rest because the
Yeah.
rest. So yeah, the one thing like up to that point, I really liked the score. I was like, this is like awesome, super dramatic Russian music. But then of course I looked it up. I'm like, oh, the score for this was done by Sergei Prokofiev, who is the composer of like Peter and the Wolf. So this movie's got some like actual like legs behind it. But yeah, like that battle music is like really like silly. Like it feels like totally like not compatible with the scale of everything else. It's like, oh, why did they play this like lighthearted music?
Yeah, and it's really noticeable too. There's one scene in particular where it's like the horses are coming from the plains or something, and you see them far away, and they're kind of charging up, and then it's like a nice shot of clouds, and it's like the impending doom is like charging towards them, and there's like that dark Russian ominous music that you were talking about before, but then once they actually start fighting, it's like boop 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 doop boop boop.
There's literally.
It's so out of place. It's just like, oh, weird. So I don't know, man. That's the only thing that I was like, eh.
Yep.
And I don't know. It was like I was saying, the first like I don't know, maybe 10 minutes didn't really lock me in, but I was really surprised. I thought this movie was pretty cool.
Yeah.
For like an 80-year-old Russian movie, I was just like, neat.
Yeah.
I was like, that's fun.
Yeah.
And it's if you didn't know, you can watch this puppy on YouTube for free.
Yes.
That's where I watched it. So
yeah. Yep. There's well, it's probably, if it is the official one, Moss Films, which also was the studio behind Alexander Nevsky. They also have the, I guess the cut version of Alexander Nevsky on there, or sorry, Andrei Rublev, and then I assume they probably also have this uploaded too, which is maybe why Criterion hasn't like rushed out to put this stuff out on Blu-ray again, because of weird changing rights and like how much they want to commit to restorations of this stuff if they can't get full versions. I don't know. My note here was where is it? Bowl Cut City.
Oh man, so many bowl cuts.
Yeah, but then we also get some Prince Valiants. which is like where it's long in the back for the Germans. But it's actually I read that this was on Wikipedia, but like I guess John Milius, the screenwriter and director, he loves this movie, and I guess like there's like whole scenes that are just lifted right from this in Conan the Barbarian, right down to James Earl Jones's Thulsa Doom hair, which is like exactly like the lead German guys, except it's black hair, but it's like the same haircut and everything, and like the staging of like kind of like the baddies arriving and enslaving and killing everybody in the village. It's Alexander Nevsky. So that's neat. I mean, yeah, this movie's got like the classic structure. We're introduced to our protagonist and him being so benevolent, and there we go. I got it right that time. Against the backdrop of great battle and war, and then it's followed by the introduction of the bad dudes. We're showing them being very bad, and then the reluctant warrior has to come and chase these bad guys away. And then there's peasant gnome hats.
Fucking right.
Yep. Plain folk. And then so my note here was big battle number 1. But then it turned out to be that was the only battle of the whole movie, because it is just one giant battle sequence for like a big third of this movie. I wrote the note, why no CGI? Because I'm watching this and I'm like, look at the limited like scale they had to work with. Like they actually had to get human beings and like actually you could still get lots of people to do it, and it looks way cooler. And it's like doing lots of practical stuff where you just have a guy standing in front of a projection while you're doing close-ups. It looks neat. The guy's charging on the horses with projections. It looks cool. And we don't do that anymore. We just have like phalanx hordes of nonsense with like one design, and it's like it's so lazy. Lots of helmets just being smashed in. It's like it's wonderful.
Yep. Yeah, there's some cool stuff. There's some actual fighting. It seems there's guys who are actually like trying to fight each other.
Throw down.
You see some axes hitting heads a couple times, and I thought that was neat.
Yeah.
But those helmets are so cool.
Oh yeah.
It's like an eagle, like a bird claw, and then like a real person's hand, and then one guy just has like fucking eggplant on his head or something. Like who knows what could pop up on these helmets.
That's right.
So much stuff. Cool.
Yeah, another highlight for me, I think probably the thing I will like most about this movie over time is just like the after battle scenes, the shots of just like the after the war. And it's like, it's so good. Just like images of just destruction. And I don't know, it lingers on it. It's very lyrical, poetic, all that jazz. But it looks really good. Like everything like this, the photography in this movie is like fantastic. I liked it quite a bit. The
Alexander Nevsky looks like Chad Kroeger from Nickelback.
And Chad Kroeger looks like Jesus.
What are you trying to say?
So RJ, from the library, I got a book. I got a book out from the library. I got a couple books. I got a book that's like Eisenstein's autobiography, which is like it's a translation of his notes and whatnot. And I also got this book called The Cinema of Eisenstein by David Bordwell. I'd like to share a couple of notes from it, if you'll oblige. So before starting the film, Eisenstein declared, "The subject of my new work can only be of one type: heroic in spirit, militant in content, and popular in its style." Recent historiography had singled out as national hero Prince Alexander Yaroslavich of Novgorod, called Nevsky because of his defeat of the Swedes at the Neva in 1240. Later, he led a campaign against the invading Teutonic and Livonian Knights. His exploits were known principally through brief poems from the late 13th and early 14th century. Alexander was canonized by none other than Ivan the Terrible in the 16th century. So,
I wonder if these things are connected.
Yes, by one man. Socialist realist literature is a thing that I was wondering about, because like why are these movies, like why are these types of stories being picked? Like why, like it's one of those things that like if you look at even in like China, where like they're the movies that you're allowed to make in China still is like you have to make historical films essentially. So like John Woo just started making historical dramas set removed from contemporary times, because that's a safe place. You can lionize the great history of China. And this was happening in the 30s, where it's like, we don't want to tell stories about now. We have to like implant our ideas into the masses and like say, look, this is the direction that Russia was always heading, and it's all about sacrifice. And so yeah, I mean, this is like the idea was like going to the past, looking for these folk heroes from Russia's like iconography and stuff like that, and just present it as like, look at this story, it has parallels to now. Look at the goddamn Germans are coming. We got to be ready to throw down. And then one other bit here. Eisenstein's script of Nevsky concluded, the original script concluded with Alexander's attempt to deceive the Mongols into believing that he would join them, as he is invited to do in the film's second scene. But so he's poisoned, though. He dies and is celebrated by the peasants. But Stalin eliminated the ending. Such a good prince must not die. The implications were not lost on the director, as it was clear that Stalin identified with Nevsky being a uniter of the people and fighting off foreign forces. Eisenstein compared his protagonist to the greatest strategist in world history, Stalin.
Whoa.
So Stalin was indeed invested in Eisenstein in film and like the way that his legacy would play out, and that would of course tie into the next couple movies we're going to be talking about here. Hey RJ, you want to talk about those movies now? Or you got any last thoughts here about Nevsky?
No, I liked it, man. I didn't think I would, but I did it. It was pretty good.
You went in with low expectations and you came out being like, that was nice.
Yeah, I thought it was a cool movie, man.
Yeah, like in some ways, watching 3 movies like this for like 1 week, it kind of was making me think of the Samurai trilogy.
Yeah.
And but I think that these kind of work better than those movies, surprisingly. All right, so on to Ivan the Terrible Part 1. So this movie came out in 1944. Another synopsis, another helpful synopsis from our good friends at Letterboxd. Sergei Eisenstein's final film. This is the first part of a 3-part biopic of Tsar Ivan Grozny, which was never completed due again to producer dissatisfaction with Eisenstein's attempts to use forbidden experimental filming techniques and excessive cost overruns. Oh, that's a really cool movie. And then it goes on to talk about the second part, and it's like history, not at all describing the plot of the fucking movie. Classic Letterboxd. So anyway,
Vintage.
Yeah. So Ivan the Terrible is another story. This one is set in the 16th century as opposed to the 13th century with our pal Alexander Nevsky, and it's it tells the rise and reign. It doesn't ever get to the fall of Ivan the Terrible, which I imagine. I don't know if that like name pops up in the Russian version of it, because you're like, wait, what's so terrible with this guy? I thought he was a good man, but I don't know. I'm not sure about that. Anyway, Ivan just becomes ruler, and one of his things is we got to get Russia united. Everyone's got to fall in. All these like minor lords, the boyars, which, oh boy, you will get to know that word watching these movies. These scheming little selfish princes who undermine the greatness of Russia, they don't like this Ivan guy's attitude, and they don't like that he's making people give up all these things, and he's playing to the masses that obviously want to throw themselves behind him. And so there's schemings, there's uprises, there's battles to be fought. Ivan goes and fights valiantly, very Nevsky style. He comes back, he gets ill on the way back. We have a very prolonged death scene that turns out not to be his death scene.
Oh, it's so good. That's the best part of any movie I've ever seen. I'll talk about it later. Keep going.
Okay. And then I don't know. Everyone thinks he's dying. Everybody's conspiring and plotting their own way of like what's going to happen after he's dead. But fake out, he's alive, but he's kind of a little bit more worse for wear. He's a little bit more paranoid and getting a little weird. And he seals the deal, and he just continues on. And the movie kind of leaves on that note of him being in power, and then the second movie continues that on. But we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Sure.
So, wow, the scale of this movie is like ridiculous. Like the rooms, the chambers, the costumes is so awesome. This actually
Mhm.
reminds me a lot of like Jodorowsky's like Dune stuff, and like
Yeah, yeah.
like even like with David Lynch's Dune stuff. It's like the operatic level of everything is just like crazy.
Yeah.
I guess like this was kind of also a complaint, I guess, especially more with the second movie, is like with like Russian culture seems so alien to like the Western tradition. When you're watching this stuff, it's really easy to get lost and like really not grasp what's going on because of its Russianness. Because like we're not really taught Russian history a great deal in Canadian schools. I remember there was a Russia unit in like social studies, and I remember czars, and I remember like Rasputin and like the Soviet rebellion and like Bolsheviks, but like this like pre like 19th century, it gets a lot foggier, and I'm like,
It's yeah. What they teach you is mostly like communist stuff, like the uprising there. I remember in grade 8, I did a report on Russia, and I drew a picture of a bear, and it just said "Don't mess with Russia." I got a thumbs up from my teacher
wow,
because grades aren't real anymore. So they said good job.
you nailed it.
Yep. What were you talking about?
How this movie reminds me of like space operas and like
Oh yeah.
European graphic novels, Jodorowsky comics, like Meta Barons or The Inkall, which I'm sure they're drawing up, like the artists working on that stuff, like Mobius or whatever, they are drawing on this sort of like art history references and probably looking at this type of stuff when they want to depict like, wow, look at this crazy large scale world. It looks like heavy metal covers and stuff like that. So, yeah, and once again, we get the awesome Russian chamber choir music stuff, like that, just great sound that, like, I don't know, it's like something I associate with Russia, and it sounds so great, and it's neat to hear it in movies. Boyers, I made just in all caps because you will read that word a lot. Particularly as it's the subtitle for the second movie, which is the plot of the Boyers. This movie is about the appeals of communism and why communism is great, without actually explaining why communism is great, other than we should be like doing all these things to help the state and just give up all sense of self and just fall in, and it'll work out perfectly for everybody.
What's the why? Why would you even question that?
Exactly. Well, that's exactly right, comrade. Yeah. So there's like. Yeah, the other thing with this movie is just awesome close-ups and the makeup. It's like shot like a silent movie, but everyone's still talking. You can hear them, but like everyone looks like has like each house of the Boyers, I guess, have a look, so you know which each member belongs to. Like each group, like there's like the bowl cut gang. There's like there's like the flamboyant, like kind of like overly dressed, the fur coat gang. Yeah, like everyone's got a look, so you kind of know who. You don't know who anyone actually is, but you know that you see like their representative scheming, and you're like, oh, okay, that's their house because everyone looks the same. It's, like I said, it's like Dune. So that stuff is like, again, like Nevsky, like my biggest takeaway from these movies is just the visuals, and like I wish that movies like even tried to like emulate the scale and like design of these movies. And yeah, once again, open fields, battles, and sieges occur. Yeah, I mean, this is very much like an action adventure historical drama. Like it hits all those sort of things. It's cool. It's okay. Yeah, that the deathbed scene is
amazing,
long. And then there's like the thing that you see constantly in these movies is the upturned head and faces. It's all very heroic and dramatic. So
Jared acted that out.
Yeah,
they can't see what you did, but he's got his chin turned up. It's very like Mussolini. I know that's a different country, but that's what it looks like.
Yeah, it's yeah, there you go. So yeah, I don't know.
There you go.
I was like, outside of the visual stuff like that, I don't really know. I'd have to watch this movie again if I ever do that to like really know kind of what was going on. Because for the most part, I was like, "What's this movie about?"
Yeah,
it's a good thing it looks so good. Because like, there's times, RJ, it kind of falls into that Henry V range.
A little bit. There are a few times that it does.
So, RJ, what did you think of IT1.
ITT
Yeah.
Part 1.
Yeah.
Well, coming off hot of Alexander Nevsky, I watched this and Ivan the Terrible one in the same day.
Yep.
And because I was so surprised by Alexander Nevsky, because when I went into it, and Andrew was like, "What's your Criterion this week?" And I was like, "A black and white Russian movie from the 30s." And she was like, "Fuck no." And then I watched the first one. I was like, "Ooh, man." I was like, "That was a hot ass flick." And I told her about it, and she's like, "That sounds cool." She's like, "I'll come watch the second one with you." Or she's like, "I'll try." And I think it really works to our benefit because we had a lot of fun with this movie. Because not in like a mean-spirited way or anything like that, but there was just having someone there to bounce things off of, I think really improved or really kind of made our the viewing more pleasurable, if that makes sense. So the aforementioned death scene was, I thought it was so fucking funny, and because he's like pretending to die, but he's like watching everyone in the room, and it's so like obvious that his eyes are like. There's a scene where they cover his face with a book, and then his head peeks down a little bit, and he's just looking around. He's like, "Is anyone watching?" And it's so fucking funny, and I was laughing quite a bit. And Andrea was kind of feeding off of my laughter, and she was kind of getting into it too. So not like we weren't like making fun of it or anything like that. It was just we were having a lot of fun watching this movie. So I actually like this one too. I don't think it's as good as the first one, but there's definitely some lulls. So a good way to say that is there's at least 20 minutes of this movie where Andrea was just checked out on her phone until I would like tap her and I'd be like, look at this, stuff like that. But I think this movie is pretty cool too, because of like what you were saying. All the sets and stuff are so like fancy, and all their wardrobes and design is so cool. Like you were saying, all the cool clans, like the bowl cut clan, and then there's the fur coat babies. It's like fur on the top quarter, and then the rest of it is like a nightgown, and it's the weirdest thing. Yeah. But those are really cool too. And then you have like the weird monks that are creepy in their cloaks.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. One thing that I found really off-putting, and I was glad Andrea was there because she kind of explained it, was everyone looked like their fucking eyes were painted on, like on their eyelids. I was like, why does everyone's eyes look like that? Because I swear, in one of the first scenes, like when he's anointed in gold or something, it looks like he has eyes painted on his eyelids. Yep. And I was like, what is that? And Andrea kind of explained to me how it's like a lining thing they did underneath, like they put white under there or something. That was what she thought it was, at least. So I don't know. I thought that was pretty crazy. That's cool. No, yeah, this one was neat. Because it's really like, it's like a soap opera almost. It's like super dramatic and like over the top. And this is kind of a comment on the on part 2 as well. But I think it's really fun how like elaborate his schemes are. To like his elaborate reenactments of things to like trick people into saying what their true intentions are. Like he fakes that he dies. He's like, I want to see who like really thinks I'm dead. See what they do with that.
Who'd really like go in behind my son?
Yeah. And it's like stuff like that still happens, you know. Like people do shit like, and political people do like things like that all the time. But it just seems so like fantastic and like over the top. I was like, this is really fun. I think this is a cool movie, this Ivan the Terrible. So I enjoyed it. The hairstyles are pretty cool. Yeah. But I don't think it's as good as the first one, but I didn't mind watching it. I would maybe watch it again in like 10 years when I'm like 80 and like real old.
A grandpa.
Yeah, grandpa movie.
Yeah. Like pretty much it's again, like all like the production stuff, the cinematography, composition stuff, it's all there still. It looks incredible, but just like on a story wise, it's like it very much is like, oh, this is the first part of the story, and it's not like a good first part of the story, like say Fellowship of the Rings, like something like that,
Oh,
where it's
come
like
on.
where it's like a complete story,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, it's got a beginning, middle, and end, and you're like, oh, what happens next? It's not structured that way. It's just not that type of story. But it's kind of like, oh, this is like part one of a it's the first act, which we never will get the third. So a couple of notes from that book again. Same kind of deal with Nevsky, forging a Soviet-era cinema for the masses and for the audience of one, because you're making your movies at the end of the day for Stalin. If Stalin doesn't like your movie, you're not going to be making movies anymore. So Tsar Ivan IV was a favorite of Stalin, and a lot of material was being generated as the history of Ivan the Terrible was being shaped to fit into contemporary times. A great man who united Russia and would be undermined by boyars around him. So I mean that aspect is like one of the ongoing stories of like Soviet Russia, if you recall, is like the purges that would happen because you can't trust anybody, and so it'd be like, I don't trust the people around me, so we're just going to liquidate them. And so this is like the boyars are very much in that line of like, hey, you guys better be careful, otherwise bad things are going to happen to you underneath me. Like your ministers, everybody. Like this is like the paranoia that it's being alluded to. But of course, one of the issues when you're telling a story about a guy named Ivan the Terrible is how do you present him as a historical prefiguration of Stalin, the guy you're trying to like portray as the hero of the story. So Eisenstein's idea, I guess, is that like. And this is like not just his idea, but drama thrives on imperfections in a character and their gaps in knowledge. And so your idea here is like you want a progressive hero, but you also have to have like someone that people can get behind and not be like perfect. So what he decides is like, okay, he's a guy who's going to make some tough decisions, but he's going to suffer nobly while doing these bad things. So there's going to be like, I had to order this guy's death. I'm going to suffer nobly about it. I'm going to feel real bad about this. And so you present it like that, even though I'm sure Stalin did not he didn't worry about it. He didn't sweat the details.
He killed like millions of people. He didn't fucking care.
Well, there's like the classic Stalin face of him sitting back and like hands kind of just resting on his chest and just like smiling beneath his mustache. And it's like, yep, he's suffering nobly. He's like, I got to make these big decisions. I'm the leader. And so yeah, there's a bit more of that here of Ivan the Terrible. But as the films would go on and like the paranoia and weirdness of him, like as he like literally like twists and like turns from this being like a very clean cut Nevsky like figure to like snarly wizard man. It kind of plays out. And so when we get to part two, which I guess amongst the politicized Russian intelligentsia, it was denounced as Hamlet-like, which was a long-standing term of abuse. It was not good to be Hamlet-like. It's like,
well, that's not good.
No, it's that English shit. That's we don't need that Shakespeare flawed character crap, that tragedy bullshit in our Russian cinema, in our Russian plays. So it was poo-pooed, this type of storytelling. Any other?
Keep going.
That's about it for here. And then we'll talk about Ivan the part two. Any other thoughts?
No, I enjoyed it because Andrew and I had fun watching it.
Riff tracksing it.
Yeah, well, not really. Like, I've talked about it before. I don't really like that stuff because it's like I don't like making fun of movies, or they make fun of movies that I actually like. And we did like it. It was fun to watch together because we're like, whoa, what's gonna happen next?
I think that's fair though. These stories aren't super deep, and you can kind of like laugh at sort of like the oddness of it because you're in the privacy of your own home. You're not in a theater watching it with a bunch of people who are like Eisenstein heads.
And then I don't like record my feelings about it to be listened to by other people.
You don't Twitch it out and live stream it and for donations.
So no, I thought this one was I enjoyed watching it. I don't think this is good, but
sure,
you could watch this one too if you were interested.
Okay.
Keep on rolling.
Part two and our third movie and final film, Ivan the Terrible Part 2 from 1958. I thought Sergei Eisenstein died in 1948. How is this being? So,
How is this being?
this is the second part of a projected 3-part epic biopic of Russian Tsar Ivan Grozny, undertaken by Soviet filmmaker Sergei Eisenstein at the behest of Joseph Stalin. Production of the epic was stopped before the third part could be filmed due to producer dissatisfaction with Eisenstein's introducing forbidden experimental filming techniques into the material, more evident in this part than the first part. As it was, this second part was banned from showings until after the deaths of both Eisenstein and Stalin and a change of attitude by the subsequent heads of the Soviet government. In this part, as Ivan the Terrible attempts to consolidate his power by establishing a personal army, his political rivals, the Russian boyars, plot to assassinate him.
Hey, that sounds like they tried to actually talk about what the movie was about.
Yeah, at the very end there. So yeah, I watched these movies over the course of 3 days. I paced myself. I watched one the Friday night. I watched one the Saturday morning, and I watched the next one on the Sunday afternoon.
Good call.
I knew otherwise it'd be tricky, and I still managed to watch a whole bunch of movies. It was a cool week. So this one is the plot of the Boyars. So hey, you thought the Boyars were done in that first movie? Nuh-uh, they're back. It's just like Empire Strikes Back, but with the Boyars.
Shit.
So anyway, this is getting a little more formal now. Those forbidden experimental filming techniques are definitely making their way more into this movie. And I have in all caps here the note of extravagance, as this movie really starts pushing like the crazy costumes and design aspects of the movie. Even though like this movie is way more interior. Like there's no, because at least in Ivan the Terrible Part 1, there's like the action sequence where he goes out into the world and he fights a battle, and you get like the awesome shots like again. That's like where I think Eisenstein's biggest strength is shooting out in the outdoors. When he's shooting indoors, and in this particular thing, it's very repetitive. So this movie really dresses down the decadence of the West. Like it essentially opens up with this scene of like all these like fancy dressed, I guess like they're Polish people just luxuriating around, being very not Russian, not good communists. They're very much into material wealth, and I don't know. It's like kind of like all the classic images of like rich people doing bad things. But here, like, this is like in Russia, you'd be like, "Oh, see, we don't want to be like that at all." So yeah, I don't know. In this story, Ivan has really gone to seed. Like he's getting haggard and like gnarled up. And again, it's just that's the story. That's all you get for the entire like hour and a half of this kind of like incomplete version of the movie in some ways. Maybe it's like assembled after the fact, so I don't know if we're watching like the real finished product of the movie, because it was actually like was made in like 1944 when the other movie was released, but it was shelved, and that was it, and that was the end of this movie's history until way later with Khrushchev running things. But yeah, the costumes and production design are amazing. The cinematography is amazing. Russian history doesn't get any less alien to me. It seems very archaic and strange, and I'm like, God, who are all these characters? There's so many names being dropped. There's got to be a more coherent way to like deliver this information, which is like always like I remember like with Game of Thrones, like I think that show does a pretty good job of like streamlining a lot of stuff. But like when you start reading the backs of those books and you start looking at the lineages of things, you're like, holy crap. And it's really good that when they did the TV show, they just threw out a lot of that, because you're like, yeah, you don't need to know that. You don't need to know that. This movie at times just feels like it's bogged down with the history it's depicting and not really knowing what it wants to do. And there's just like a good half hour of plotting in this movie where it's just like kind of like the deathbed scene where it's just like, oh, there's like it's just them having conversations about, should we do this? Shouldn't we do this? I don't know if I feel we should do this. Are we justified in doing this? And then we get some, like, before that, there's like flashbacks. It's kind of a mess of a movie. And then, RJ, when I was watching this movie, or when I was watching part 1 and half of part 2, I was like, man, imagine if this was shot in color. Like, just like, fuck, it would be ridiculous. Like, if this was shot in like Technicolor and like took full advantage of like the ridiculousness of like the colors of those costumes that we're seeing, this movie would be incredible. And then out of nowhere, this movie turns to color. And I went,
Mm-hmm.
whoa, oh, wicked. Wait, this is like not real color. This is
No,
like
it's
sepia.
not.
This is like weird sepia tones and stuff like that. Oh, why does everything look so ugly now? Oh, I wanted to go back to black and white. It looks so much better. And then like we get the like this whole sequence that's in pseudo color of like he's trying to poison Ivan the Terrible, of this his aunt's son, his nephew or cousin or whatever, and it's like, oh my god, and I lose total interest.
Yep.
And so Ivan the Terrible Part 2 is not so great. It's just something is lost in just like, I don't know. It's hard to even judge this movie because it seems like I don't know if this was his finished movie or it was just like how much of it was buried. But I found it to be very unsatisfying compared to the other two. RJ, what did you think of Ivan the Terrible Part 2?
I think that's a way people describe this podcast is very unsatisfying compared to the other.
When we get to the actual reviews.
Yeah. Yeah, this one's not great. I didn't really like it. Andrea watched the first half of it with me, like the first 40 minutes maybe, and even she was like, this one's not very good, and she just got up and left like halfway through. And I was like, okay. So Alexander Nevsky I thought was great. I was surprised. I really liked it. Ivan the Terrible 1, we enjoyed watching it. I thought it was a lot of fun. Ivan the Terrible Part 2, I think what you said is probably accurate. Like, something got lost. I don't know what it is about it. Like, it's got all the same stuff. It just doesn't. It's just not as good.
Yeah.
It's just not as good, and it's kind of a bummer because it's like I was saying. Like, I actually like the first two out of these. So it was when this one finished, I was like, oh man. I was like, well, that sucks. I was hoping I would get a third banger out of this, but
The Two Towers.
Yeah, exactly. Is this what we're doing now? Is comparing Lord of the Rings? Hey, I never told you in the preamble. I am actually reading Lord of the Rings right now.
Aw, why?
Yeah. Well, whatever. Okay, I've never read it, and I want to because I'm gonna watch those at New Christmas. So shut up. Shut up, Jarrett. Yeah, number 3's okay. The color scene is weird. It seems like out of place.
The color scene, the sequence, the endless sequence. Yeah,
the endless sequence. Yeah, and that dance scene goes on for fucking ever. It's like a full 10 minutes.
It honestly, this part for me is a total blur. Like, I just was like not involved in any of this.
It's not great, man.
No,
it's not great.
I mean, it's part of the. It's a compromise, but it's a compromised vision, so it's like hard to like hold it against it. I'd be like, you should probably watch it if you're like into Eisenstein stuff. Absolutely, you should check it out. But like, man, I don't know. It makes it hard to recommend. Oh, you should watch Ivan the Terrible. Like either of them. It's like watch Alexander Nevsky, watch Battleship Potemkin, probably watch Strike. But I don't know. These are like they're deep cuts in my opinion. But it's funny, Roger Ebert, I was reading his like great movies review of this, and he was like even kind of like, these are movies you watch once. Like they're things that you need to get out. No one loves these movies. They're not great movies by any means. They're like just like these great pieces of cinema that are like great examples of cinema and filmmaking. Yeah. But I don't know. Let's check out maybe RJ who hates these movies.
All 3 of them?
Yeah.
Surely you jest.
Well, I don't. I take my job very seriously.
Yeah.
The lowest rating on all these movies is by this guy by the name of Dave Mello. And his lowest rating goes to Alexander Nevsky. He gives it a half star. It could not stand the test of time.
What?
Yeah.
That's not enough to go off of, man.
Yeah, but all his reviews, like I think he liked them more as they went on, which is strange.
That's the opposite.
Yeah, but yeah, he doesn't like any of them. But that's enough for him. Cosmic Monkey.
Mm-hmm.
1 star for Alexander Nevsky. As a piece of anti-fascist, anti-church, anti-bourgeois, pro-military, nationalist propaganda, it's phenomenal.
Come on.
But as a piece of art and entertainment viewed through a modern lens, it's pretty atrocious. There's repetitive, boring scenes, sound design years behind what Hollywood was making at the time, cardboard characters with no development, and a script so over the top in its message and tone that it actually becomes laughably bad at times.
Haha. You got him, man. You really stuck it to this old Russian dude who's dead.
Yeah, Eisenstein.
More like rise and shine, am I right? Like wake up and make a better movie.
Leonardo gave
Ooh.
Ivan 2 stars. Adventures in Sight and Sound box checking number 51. I have liked every movie in the Sight and Sound 250 up to this one. Even with my least favorite, Duck Soup, it was possible to see why it was considered an envelope-pushing landmark, and my reservations mostly stemmed from the inevitable subjectivity of humor and all that. Furthermore, both of Sergei Eisenstein's films I'd seen before, Battleship Potemkin and Strike, I consider towering masterpieces, especially the latter, which still ranks high among my all-time favorites. So by all accounts, I should have at least tolerated this film. I don't know what happened exactly. I had no reason to be predisposed against it, nor am I usually one to feel impatient when things take a minute to happen in old classics. But this, oh Lord forgive me, this was just so mind-numbingly boring. Never mind the fact that all of the actors deliver their lines in a stagey, belabored manner, taking long breaks between sentences for reasons that never
Just
become
how people
clear.
talk.
Never mind the lack of tonal variation, or more accurately, the lack of a tone, at least one I could for the life of me make out amid all the pretentious portent infesting every scene and every line of dialogue. Never mind the scraping of the tempestuous editing of Eisenstein's previous films in favor of a fixation with long, virtually inert takes that all but beg you to zone out. What angered me the most,
wrap it up.
and I do mean angered, hence the 2 stars, is that the film never puts in the slightest bit of effort to get you to care about anything that's happening in it. It seems
That's
to
not
come
true.
from a place of superiority almost. Like the history of its depicting is so serious and important that you just have to suck it up and pay attention whether you like it or not. By this, I don't mean that I wanted the movie to hold my hand, or that I wanted a conventionally satisfying narrative, or even that I wanted to be entertained. I just wanted some kind of stimulus, some reason to stop watching other than the obligation to finish it. I just wanted something. This film was, to me, a parade of things happening because they were happening. The only saving grace being that the way they looked whilst happening was kitschy and idiosyncratic and vaguely homoerotic enough to hold some sensory allure. Maybe it's just a matter of taste, an extension of my problem with solemn historical dramas. Maybe it's not. Whatever the case, here's hoping part 2 is better.
Jeez Louise, Jarrett.
It's what's awesome about that. It's like I was reading it and I'm like, I don't know what movie he's even talking about. Like
No, you don't.
it's an Eisenstein movie, but like there's like no reference at all to the movie. It's just like his rant. It's incredible.
Yeah, but all he even talks about is like other things where he's like, these are my favorite movies, and this is why I think those movies are good. It's like he doesn't talk about it at all.
No.
What a jerk.
And then here, S.J. Honeywell gives Ivan the Terrible Part 2 1 star. Part 1 is pure shit. Part 2 is not much improved. Silly and stupid.
Well, hey, at least they didn't fucking drone on for like 8 days about mindless bullshit that no one cares about. Like, ugh, gross.
Yeah. So, RJ,
Yo.
that's it for those 3 movies. When are you gonna watch Battleship Potemkin?
Probably never.
Oh.
Why, is it any good?
I think as a person who does a film podcast.
No, come on.
But
That's
see,
not
the problem is
important.
they're from the. It's currently housed by the competition Kino. So I guess until we start a Kino Creeps podcast. I guess it's off. It's off guard. You can't touch it. It's bad news.
I'm not even gonna bother. But I don't care about important movies. That's not my role in this.
No.
I'm just here to make fart and butt jokes.
Watch Lord of the Rings.
Mel Gibson, and give the everyman's opinion on this stuff.
Old Joe Lunchpail.
Joe Lunchpail. By the way, speaking of Joe Lunchpails, have you seen this picture of Eisenstein on Letterboxd? It is fucking out of control. He looks like Jimmy Neutron.
He looks like Eraserhead.
Yeah.
I know.
What a cool dude.
Yeah.
Neat. Okay.
I think that's it, pal.
Yeah, I think so.
We did it.
Well, we tried.
After the break, we're going to unite Canada and rule with a iron fist. But
you got that right.
I don't know how long RJ's going to last.
Man, I will take you out poisoned style.
Yeah. You and what Boyer?
That really fancy one who's like kind of looks pretty feminine.
You're kind of on your way to the bowl cut and that beard.
Hey, this is an intentional look. My stylist did this intentionally.
Is that the Caesar?
It's the Cesar. The guy who talks to the dogs. Isn't that the dog whisperer or whatever?
Yeah, it is.
Cesar? Yeah, that's Cesar Milan.
Beautiful.
What's up?